The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Thomas. So today's reading I've changed a little bit. I've changed the order of the verses in order to make it flow more kind of logically, and deleted pieces that were kind of irrelevant to the topic I want to treat of in the homily. So it's a foreshortened version of this passage. Jesus says, "Whoever does not hate his father and his mother as I do cannot be a disciple to me. And whoever does not love his father and his mother as I do cannot become a disciple to me. Because my mother gave me falsehood, but my true mother gave me life." Jesus says, "Whoever knows the father and the mother will be called the child of the whore." Jesus says, "Damn the Pharisees. They are like a dog sleeping in the cattle manger. The dog neither eats nor lets the cattle eat." Gospel inspired by God. In 1956, when I was just about 9 years old, one day I was reading the newspaper and I came across this extraordinary photograph. And the story behind it was that it was a photograph that had been taken over the Alps by a reconnaissance pilot during World War II. And it was aerial photography, just looking down on the Alps. And it was a black and white photograph. And the white was just the snow, and the black was the shadows in the valleys. And ostensibly, it appeared just to be black and white. And then at some stage, as you were watching it, suddenly an image leaped out, and you could see the face of Christ. It was like a bearded man looking over one shoulder, this much of him. And once you saw it, you could never again not see it. But it might take you 5 minutes to see it, or it might take you 10 minutes to see it, or some people couldn't see it, but it was absolutely there. And so when I went to Healdsburg in 1994, and I built a little room onto the cabin, the existing cabin, I painted a version of this on the back wall. It was about 5 feet by 4 feet in black and white. And when visitors came, I would take them in and say, "Have a look at that, tell me what you see." And some people always would say, "Oh my God, it's an image of Christ." And other people would look at it, and no, what part should I be looking at? And I tried to tell them which part, and after 5 minutes, they go, "Oh my God, I see it. And once you see it, you can't ever again not see it. Other people would look for a half an hour, no, and they'd come back in again and look, and they couldn't. They never saw it. And what was involved it was a kind of a subtle shift in focus. It was a softening of the gaze that allowed the existing pattern to come through just the dots and dashes. So I remember at that stage as well, I had 4 different Bible study groups in Palo Alto that I met with on a weekly basis. And so one of the lectures, I printed a photocopy of this, and I gave everybody a copy of it at the beginning of the Bible study. And I asked them to tell me what they could see in it. And immediately, some people got it. After 5 minutes, other people got it. Some people couldn't get it. And at one stage, halfway through the lecture, I'm sitting there, and there's a guy across the room, and he's looking at my page, which is back to him, and he's seeing through the back of it, and all of a sudden he says, "Oh my God, I can see it." That somehow the fact that he was looking across the room through the back of the image was allowing him to see it. So sometimes it's just a subtle shift in focus that allows us to see stuff that's already there, but we didn't previously see. The same thing I find when I came to Palo Alto, way at the beginning, I was walking up University Avenue one day, and I went to a shop window, stuff I needed to buy, and I looked into the shop window. And because of where the sun was, there was a total glare and a sheen on the window. So all I could see was my own reflection. And then I had to kind of change my focus so that I could see through the glass and through my own self-image into the contents in the window. So it involved this subtle shift in focus again. Very, very often where I live in Healdsburg, I live in the mountains, very steep terrain and very, very wooded. And there's a little small airport about 8 miles away. So occasionally there'll be a small little biplane circling around. Now biplanes are notoriously difficult to recognize by their sound. Yeah, it's very hard to directionalize where it's coming from, particularly when you live in the mountains and the signal is bouncy all over. You hear the noise, there's kind of a drone, and you have no idea, is it up at 3,000 feet or 10,000 feet, and where is it? And you're looking around constantly. And the difficulty is, when you look into the sky, there's no background and foreground. So it is very difficult to focus when you're looking for something in the sky, because there's neither background nor foreground. And then at some stage you stumble upon it and your eyes immediately focus correctly and now you can see it very clearly. That's why, for instance, the moon appears to be huge at the horizon, but when it gets up into the sky, it diminishes in size. And the reason is the same thing. When it's on the horizon, we have a background and a foreground, so the brain can estimate the size of it. When it shifts up into the sky, there no longer is a background. The sky is not a background because it seems to be stretching infinitely, so the eye can't focus correctly, so it misdiagnoses the size of the moon, so it shrinks it down. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the notion of the subtle shift in focusing that brings the teachings of Jesus from dogma into mysticism. And I'm going to make 4 main points this morning. The first one I will talk about the long journey from right here to right here. And secondly, I will call it riddle me this. Thirdly, I will talk about the keys of the kingdom. And then fourthly, I will talk about mystical atheism. So they're the 4 points I'll make this morning. So the first one is the long journey from right here to right here. When you look at Jesus' journey in his own lifetime into Christ consciousness, just from being Jesus, the carpenter from Galilee, into being a fully realized Christ conscious being, it was a journey that seemed to involve the shedding of images, the refocusing of self-perceptions. He had to let go, firstly, of a sense of ego, or his own small identity. He had to let go of his idea of who his parents were, as we hear in the readings today. He had to let go of the notion of who father and mother were. He had to let go of the notion of who his tribe was. He had to let go of the notion of what his religion consisted of. So slowly by slowly, he's sloughing off these misperceptions and he's focusing very, very differently. But the truth is, that very long journey, in truth, is the shortest safari we ever make. Because it really just involves a shift in focusing. It's a very subtle shift in focusing consciousness. The trouble is, most of us only realize that after we've left home and journeyed for years and years in foreign places, and we come back home, and as T.S. Eliot says, we recognize the place for the very first time. There's a proverb in English that says, "He knows not England, who only England knows." And so most of us spend all our lifetime searching for the kingdom, not realizing that a very subtle shift in consciousness is what brings us there. This is what Jesus is teaching us. That's my first point. The second point I call riddle me this. Many languages, and certainly Swahili among them, love to play with words, and they love to play with riddles. So in Swahili there's a whole formula. When you want to play this game with somebody, you say to them, "Kitendawili," which means riddle me. And the person replies, "Tega, I will trap it. Give me the riddle and I'll trap it for you." So a typical dialogue goes like this. I will say, "Kitendawili," riddle. And you say, "Tega, I will trap it." And I say something like, "Nyumba yangu ndogo, haina mlango." My house is very small, it has no door. And then you got to figure it out. And the answer to it in Swahili is yai. It's an egg. My house is very small, it has no door. So you play this kind of game in which you have to let go of rational thinking and somehow begin to go beyond it. Zen Buddhism does this in spades. Zen Buddhism, when it pronounces its koans, they give you phrases which have no logical or rational explanation. Stuff like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And so when you go and study with a Zen master, they're trying to take you beyond the rational mind. Because the realization is the rational mind can't bring you into mystery. It can't really get you there. We have to go beyond that. And so I'm fascinated that Jesus constantly uses koans. In fact, to pun, it's like his teachings are riddled with koans. And today is no exception. The first 2 phrases in Thomas's gospel today says, "Unless you hate your father and mother as I do, you cannot be my disciple." Next phrase, "Unless you love your father and mother as I do, you cannot be my disciples." The person who knows his father and mother will be called the son of the whore. Now, what in God's name is this about? There's no rational, logical way of making sense of this. You have to kind of go into Zen mode or riddle mode in order to make sense of these things. The difficulty is we somehow think that the rational mind is the apex of evolution. We have come in the history of our planet from just physical stuff, which is studied by physics, to live stuff, which is studied by biology, to mental stuff, which is studied by psychology. But all the mystical traditions tell us that there are at least two phases beyond that. There's the phase of soul, which is proper to theology, and the place of spirit, which is proper to mysticism. So it always amazes me that we can really think that 14 billion years of cosmic evolution have culminated in the human species and there's no place beyond us. Or that 4.5 billion years of global evolution have merely thrown up the human species and the rational mind, and there's no place beyond the human species or beyond the rational mind. Doesn't make any sense. Of course, there are places beyond it. The great Hindu mystic who lived at the beginning of this century, Sri Aurobindo, he talked about very many stages after rational mind. He called the first one supermind. And then there was a place called illuminated mind beyond that. And then there was a place called the unitive mind beyond, the intuitive mind beyond that. And then finally, there was the overmind. And then you had soul and spirit. So there are many stages beyond that. And it's only when we can dig into these pieces that we can start making sense of the enigmas and the paradoxes that Christ constantly offers to us. When he says stuff like, it's harder for a rich man to get to heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Imagine that extraordinary graphic image. Imagine a camel trying to squeeze itself through the eye of a needle. What does that enigma mean? Or if Christ says, if your eye scandalizes you, pluck it out and throw it from you. It's better to enter heaven with one eye than to enter hell with both of your eyes. Now, if we take this literally, we'd all be blind amputees. Obviously, we can't take. It's not about literalism. He makes these extraordinary, beautiful, elegant statements. Stuff like when he says, for instance, if you can't be trusted with something that does not belong to you, who's going to trust you with what is your own? Now, that's totally counterintuitive. We would imagine that somebody said, well, he's not able to look after his own property, so I'm damned if I'm going to put him in charge of my property. But here's Christ saying the opposite. If you can't be trusted with that which belongs to somebody else, who's going to trust you with that which belongs to yourself? So he's constantly proposing these koans to us, these riddle, because he's inviting us beyond the rational mind into a different level of self. That we have to gnostically encounter the material or the matter of Christ's teaching in order to come into proper kind of relationship with it. That's my second point. So on the basis of that then, I want to talk about the keys of the kingdom. I want to take a few phrases from today's reading, some of the enigmatic phrases, and see if I can tease them out by going to a place beyond just rational mind. And the phrases I want to take out, I want to look at the notion of mother. How is he using mother? What does he mean by this? And the phrase, the son of a whore. What does this mean? And when he uses the words, you must hate, and you must love, and you must know, what do these three words mean? And when he uses the phrase, as I do, you have to love as I do, you have to hate as I do, you have to know as I do. What's this phrase, as I do? So I'll offer you my hits on these four subcomponents. So when Jesus is talking about mother, there's a whole range of possibilities. So you have to love your mother as I do, you have to hate your mother as I do, you have to know your mother, and then you're going to be called the son of the whore. What does he mean by mother? So is mother simply the earth female who conceived me in her womb and carried me in her womb and birthed me? Is that what he's talking about? And am I supposed to hate that or love that or know that? Is this mother when he's talking about it? And when he talks about mother, is he talking about the parenting that inducts us into the cultural trance? Is that what he means by mother? So that which inducts us into the cultural trance, is that mother to us? Or is it the religious system into which we were born, which gave us both our orienting principles on the one hand, and our prejudices and biases and enemies on the other hand? Is that what he's talking about when he means mother? And is that the mother to love or the mother to hate? And when he talks about mother, is he talking about the feminine aspect of source, the feminine face of God? The part that gentles us, soothes us, and draws us into compassion for all our siblings, all species of life. Is he talking about that which played the first game of hide and go seek with itself, which camouflaged itself in its own creation and then invited its creation to move into evolutionary self-awareness so it could recognize that there was only God playing this game with God? So is that what he means by mother? Because some of these mothers you can love and some of these mothers you need to hate. But I'll define what I mean by love and by hatred. So we have to be very, very careful when he's saying, you must love your mother as I do, which of these mothers is he talking about? And when he says, you must hate your mother as I do, which of these mothers is he talking about? You have to figure this one out. Yeah? The second phrase he uses, then he says, the one who knows his father and mother will be called the son of the whore. Now, who is the son of the whore? The son of the whore is the person who is able to distinguish between these two mothers. The one who knows which is real mother to hate, and the one who knows the mother to love. The one who can distinguish is the son of the whore. It's the one then who appears to be countercultural and heretical and appears to be a traitor to the nation, because their behavior is not in alignment with the codes that most of us live by. But the phrase itself is really interesting. He didn't say he will be called a bastard. There was a very powerful word in Hebrew for bastard, and it's used frequently. It's mamzer. But he didn't say the one who knows his father and mother will be called a bastard, because when you think about it, a bastard is the result of a love affair. But it's a love affair. Even if it's illicit or extramarital, it's the result of a love affair. But the son of the whore is the accidental issue of a professional harlot and a promiscuous male. So this is a real criticism. He says, you're not just going to be called a bastard, because you could be a love child if you were a bastard. But you'll be called the son of the whore, because you're the result of a professional harlot meeting a promiscuous male. So what does that mean? It means you're really, really an eyesore to the theology of our times. So this is the difficulty with this phrase. We have to really go to the core of what this criticism was. How society, whether it's the religious group or the culture or the tribe, regards the person who's out of step with the rest of us. Then when he uses the phrase, you must hate your mother and father as I do, you must love your mother and father as I do, you must know your mother and father. What does he mean by these phrases? So obviously, to hate your mother and father, it is not about feelings, it's not about angry feelings, it's not even about judgment of them. It's the disidentification with the paradigm in which they're trying to induct you. It's the realization that you want no part of that mindset or that model or that paradigm. So hatred has nothing got to do with bad feelings towards or judgment of. It is the disidentification with the induction. That's what hatred means. And loving has nothing got to do with mushy feelings towards them. It's the recognition, the soul-to-soul recognition of the true essence of somebody and the decision to relate to that part and not merely to a persona or to an ego. And to know the father and mother is to realize at the deepest core of being that there is only God. There is nothing except God presenting itself in this game of hide and go seek. That's what it looks like to me. And then this phrase, finally, he says, you have to love your father and mother as I do, and you've got to hate your father and mother as I do, and you've got to know your father and mother as I do. So what's the significance of this phrase that he repeats 3 times? I do, as I do, as I do, as I do. This is a phrase, unfortunately, that the churches have totally twisted. And they've twisted from as I do to as we decree. So we're not being invited anymore to act as Christ acted. We're being invited instead to believe what the church tells us. So it's the journey from orthopraxis to orthodoxy. It's the journey from right livelihood and right action to merely right creedal formulations. And so much of Christianity has been about proposing a set of human dogmas and then telling us we need to kowtow to those. Christ never asked anybody to believe in something. When he talked about faith, it's not credo he's talking about, it's cordo. The word faith is mistranslated often. Credo is to give intellectual assent to a creedal formulation. Cordo is to give your heart to. It's a mistranslation. When Christ talks about faith, it's an invitation to meet something at the deepest possible level. It's not a faith assent to a group of doctrines or teachings. And so, as I do, is an invitation from Christ to follow Christ consciousness and not to follow dogmatic degrees. Which brings me to my 4th point then. I call it mystical atheism. The beauty and the difficulty of mystical spirituality is that as it encounters normality, it is totally out of step. And so it is out of step sociologically. It's out of step with the culture, because cultures operate according to some kind of minimalistic morality. in which it's okay to kill the bad guys, but we're the good guys. So we operate on this minimalistic moral system, and the mystic is somebody, or the truly spiritual seeker is somebody who's gone way beyond that. They're not interested in human decrees or human edict. They're interested in how the universe actually works. Not just the physical workings of the universe, but the workings of the spiritual universe, all of the dimensions of the universe. They want to know how that system works, and they want to be in alignment with that. And so they appear to be out of step sociologically, and sometimes they're even branded as immoral beings, because the way they make decisions contravenes some of our laws, because they're seeing beyond the laws. Secondly, they run into huge problems with the tribe, whether that tribe is a small little clan in the middle of Africa, or whether it's a nation like the United States of America. They run into big problems because they're not prepared to believe in the propaganda which the tribe propagates. They're not prepared to do that. And they're certainly not prepared to sacrifice the designated enemies on the altars of national security. They won't do that. And so often they're branded as traitors and treacherous to the cause. And most significantly of all, they're out of step with the religious background from which they've come so very, very often. And they're branded then as heretics and even blasphemers. They're totally out of step. And so Jesus uses a very strong condemnation. He says, "Damn you Pharisees. You're like dogs sitting down or lying down in a cattle manger. You won't let the cattle eat the hay, and you can't eat the hay yourself." So what is he talking about? He's talking about the custodians of the status quo, whether that's a religious grouping or an economic grouping or a political grouping, but in this context, mainly it's the religious grouping. The custodians of the status quo who are afraid to allow spirit to do its work. The dog does not eat hay. There's no point in the dog sitting in a manger of hay. He can't eat hay, it's no good to him. The cows can and they want to, but the dog won't allow them. So very often, the alleged spiritual leaders are the people who don't understand the mystery that they hold, of which they're custodians, and they won't let the others who want to come in to taste it. At some stage, the docile cows have to go beyond the snarling dogs and take the food anyway. So the custodians, very, very often, they're the people who are trying to hold back spirit. They're like modern-day little Dutch boys with their fingers stuck in the hole in the dam that holds back the waters of spirit, whose destiny is to overflow the parched lands of our prejudices.